So, John, I'm glad you read Isaiah 46 and closed out with verses 9 and 10. I'm God, there is no other. I'm God declaring the end from the beginning, there's none like me. So as it looks like the world is falling apart, remember that it's all actually coming together. You know, in alignment with God's word. He foretold these things. So let's pray. Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity to gather, still in a free country. We pray that you protect us within this country and help this country turn itself around. We thank you for your word, your prophetic word. We know you gave it to us because you loved us, that you are outside of time. You know the end from the beginning. And we thank you for caring enough for us to share your word so we can be prepared for the days in which we live. And that's what we're going to try to do tonight, Lord. Be with us, bless us, edify us, and prepare us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, round two. How many of you were here last night? What are you, gluttons for punishment? Okay. I'm going to be talking about Ezekiel 38. You probably, I'm sure John has taught on this prophecy several times, if not more. Teaching from a 3-disc DVD that we did with Prophecy Watcher Studio when God Defends Israel. We sold those out last night, so I have my website up here. If you are interested in any resources from that DVD, you can get them at prophecydepot.com. I also want to introduce you to, we have a prophecyheadlines.com. If you want to get a clue of what's going on a daily news site, this is our Bible newspaper, prophecyheadlines.com, that examines current events through the prophetic lens. So we put things on daily about what we think is important, have prophetic implications. So I invite you to go there every day and kind of get your daily news, not your fake news, but your true news. So if you're here last night, you noticed I like to play trailers before I talk about a certain subject, so you can kind of get a clue of what I'm going to be talking about. Well, we're going to do that again. I can get a little sound on this.
The world is about to receive a shocking wake-up call. According to an ancient prophecy found in the book of Ezekiel, the God of the Bible is going to put the world on official notice that He is the one true God.
The prophet writes, "And in that day I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. And the nations shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel."
Ezekiel foretells that in the last days, Russia, Turkey, Iran, and 6 other member nations will invade Israel from the far parts of the north. They are coming down to conquer Israel and take over its plunder and great booty. But the Lord, not America nor the Israeli Defense Forces, but the Lord, stops these invaders supernaturally with a great earthquake, pestilence, and bloodshed, flooding rains, great hailstones, and fire and brimstone. Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 provide every aspect of this foretold event. The stage is set, the prophecy is ready to happen, and now you can discover every detail and prepare yourself for this soon coming powerful event. Now available, one of the most comprehensive videos ever produced on this topic, a 3-disc DVD produced by Prophecy Watchers TV, featuring Bill Salus and Mondo Gonzalez. This timely DVD is entitled Ezekiel 38, When God Defends Israel, the Coming Russian-Iranian-Led Invasion of the Promised Land, and it explains every facet of the Ezekiel 38 and 39 foretellings. You will discover the coming greater and safer Israel that someday dwells securely without walls, bars, or gates, the timing, setting, and location of the Russian-Iranian-led invasion, the identity of the invaders, the motives of these attackers, the supernatural victory by the Lord, and the aftermath period when Israel buries the dead armies and converts their weapons into energy. You will learn all this and much, much more from the Ezekiel 38 When God Defends Israel 3-disc DVD. This is by far the most exhaustive video ever produced on Ezekiel 38 and 39. You need to prepare yourself and your family for these powerful end-time events that are coming. And that's exactly what the Ezekiel 38 When God Defends Israel DVD will help you do. Pick up your copy of this powerful DVD today.
Okay, so that gives you sort of an overview of the prophecy. Any questions so far? Just kidding. So listen, let's find ourselves on the prophetic timeline. We are between two very powerful marquee events of the end times. One of them is past, and it was the rebirth of the nation of Israel in 1948. We're moving very rapidly toward the other second marquee event, which is the Gog and Magog war in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is, of course, the topic for tonight. The reason that's a marquee event is because that's the event that God has chosen in the latter days to put the world on official notice that He is the one true God. It says in Ezekiel 39, verse 7, I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. And I will not let them profane my holy name anymore. And the nation shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. It requires a my people Israel, which are the chosen people of the Abrahamic covenant. He's going to uphold His unconditional covenant with Abraham and the Abrahamic covenant. And this particular event, Ezekiel 38, it also requires a land of Israel because He's going to prove He's the Holy One in Israel, the promised land, the chosen people, and the promised land. Therefore, we have those two facets of the Abrahamic covenant available today, the chosen people, Israel, in the promised land. So we are 74 years past the first event, the rebirth of the nation of Israel. We are marching closely to it in 2022, but we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. The stage is set. We talked about this. You saw it on the trailer. But there's a question mark there because I believe there's certain things that have to happen before Ezekiel 38 and 39. What are those things? Well, I talked about some of those things last night. I'll briefly scan a few of them tonight. But this focuses on Ezekiel 38 and 39. And when you look at Ezekiel 38 and 39, the golden rule of interpretation applies here because everything about this prophecy can be taken literally. And what that golden rule of interpretation is by Dr. David L. Cooper is when the plain sense of Scripture makes common sense seek no other sense. Therefore, take every word at its primary, ordinary, usual, literal meaning, unless the facts of the immediate context studied in the light of related passages and axiomatic, self-evident, and unquestionable fundamental truths indicate clearly otherwise. So what that basically is saying is don't allegorize this prophecy, don't spiritualize this prophecy. When the plain sense makes common sense, read it literally as it says. We have to, when Ezekiel spoke, he had in the vocabulary of his time, he had, territories and populations called Magog and Togarmah and Meshech. So we had to put a face on them, and we have to put modern day weapons in them instead of bows and arrows and things. But we have to look at this literally. It tells us everything about it. You're going to see that tells us who the invaders are, what their motive is, the conditions in Israel when an event happens, how it gets defeated, what happens in the aftermath. 52 verses of probably the most detailed prophecy in the whole Bible. Why? Because this is the event God has chosen to put the world on official notice that He is God. So, we have 15 participants in the Ezekiel 38 prophecy. You have the victor, who is God. He stops this invasion supernaturally. The intended victim is Israel. The invaders are by their ancient names, Magog, Rosh, Meshech, Tubal. Persia will put a map up there so you see who they are today, their modern day equivalents. Ethiopia, Libya, Gomer, and Togarmah. But there are some protesters barking from the sidelines. You have Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, and their young lions. And tonight I'm going to provide the archaeological, biblical, historical, geographical, and geopolitical reasons why I believe the merchants of Tarshish are the UK, and one of the young lions is America. So if you want to find out the future of America, it looks like we can find out something from this prophecy. We certainly can find out the future of Russia from this prophecy, and Turkey from this prophecy, and Iran from this prophecy. But I think we can find out much more about our own country here. So the coalition, Magog, Togarmah, etc., the general consensus you see up on the map there, and on the left side their names. You have Russia and the southern steppes of Russia. You'd have the stands, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan more than likely. Turkey, Iran, Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, and you'd give Morocco and Germany an honorable mention. Some people think they are also involved. It's interesting when you look on that list that Morocco and Sudan are in the Abraham Accords. At some point, they will invade Israel along with Russia. So the Abraham Accords will not last indefinitely, if you're familiar with the Abraham Accords. So they comprise, on another look here, an outer ring of countries. They don't share common borders with Israel. You see their ancient names superimposed on their modern-day countries. They've never been Israel's notorious enemies, but they will invade Israel for plunder and booty. We'll discover their motive momentarily. They're predominantly Muslim except for Russia. And we're going to compare this in contrast to an inner ring. I showed some of these maps last night, so some of you have seen them. And this is the Psalm 83 inner circle, but none of the belligerents in Ezekiel 38 are involved on the inner ring of countries. I'll talk about Psalm 83 just very briefly in the mid part of this to show you why I don't think Ezekiel 38 is quite ready to happen just yet. But there's an inner ring of countries, share common borders with Israel. They're in Psalm 83. There's an outer circle of countries in Ezekiel 38 that don't share common borders with Israel. So let's kind of look at what's going on in modern day time right now. Russia, Turkey, and Iran are involved in this prophecy. Their relationships nationally have never been stronger. They're solidifying year by year. Here they met in Sochi, Russia together in November of 2017, Ankara, Turkey in 2018, Tehran in September 2018, and again Sochi, Russia in February of this year. They're meeting together because they were all involved in the Syrian revolution. They have interests in Syria's normalization, coming back into independence. Bashar al-Assad of Syria has pretty much won that war at this point. The revolution has pretty much ceased. It's interesting that Barack Obama had allowed Vladimir Putin to move in hands-free into Syria, thinking he would sort of tone that whole revolution down, but what Vladimir Putin did instead was he bombed Bashar al-Assad's enemies to smithereens and helped Bashar al-Assad win that revolution. Russia also is deeply in bed with Iran because they're involved in building nuclear reactors in the west coast side of Iran. We talked about an Elam prophecy last night, and we also talked about how they, no matter what happens with this treaty that Iran's trying to make with the JCPOA, if it gets revived, if there's any sanctions to come out of this, Russia is unable to get $10 billion. So their relationship with Iran is not going away. They're solidified. And another clue that this prophecy is coming at us real quickly. Now, when Russia invaded Ukraine, which was just about 4 days after the Olympics in Beijing, which they were already, when the Olympics were going on, Russia was starting to mount its troops around the Ukraine. And it appeared many people were suspecting that they would invade Ukraine after the Olympics, and they sure did that about 4 days later. It was as if they had a gentleman, or should I say a communist dictatorship agreement between Xi Jinping of China, Vladimir Putin of Russia. So pictures started surfacing of Hitler looking like Vladimir Putin. And it was showing up all over the place. Is Putin the next Hitler, so to speak? Russia invades Ukraine on multiple fronts in a brutal act of war. Now, there are some parallels I'm going to point out between what happens in Ezekiel 38 and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia says they invaded Ukraine, and let me explain this. We're in the latter days. A Russian leader, which is what Gog and Magog, Gog is considered the Russian leader. Gog is the title of a leader. Magog would be up in Russia, in the area, around Moscow perhaps. And thoughts would come into his mind, an evil plan, an unprovoked attack on a country for plunder and booty. Now, Russia says they invaded because they didn't want NATO to come into the West and move closer to the Russian borders. But I believe he had ulterior motives because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. It's second largest in gas reserves, although most of those in Europe, although most of that is untapped. It's the fifth largest producer of corn in the world. Russia and Ukraine together account for the fourth largest producer of world's wheat. So, you know, there's plunder and booty that could have been obtained as well, perhaps an ulterior motive. Trying to find some parallels here. So when we look at Ezekiel 38, we have a Russian leader in the latter days. Here's what it says in Ezekiel 38. It says, "Thus says the Lord God, on that day in the latter days, it shall come to pass the thoughts arise in your mind," being a Russian leader in the latter days, And you will make an evil plan. You will say, I will go up to a land of unwalled villages. I will go to a peaceful people and who dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. So we see a parallel there. A Russian leader going into a land with an evil plan to invade it, a peaceful people, which Ukraine was at the time. Why? To take great plunder and to take booty, to stretch out your hand against the waste places that are again inhabited, and against the people gathered from the nations who have acquired livestock and goods, who dwell in the midst of the land of Israel. So this is an invasion of Israel, not an invasion of Ukraine, of course. Now you see that I've put some pictures up here of Vladimir Putin, making him look like he's Gog. Now we don't know if he's Gog. He's, you know, some people think he has cancer and maybe Parkinson's at this point, but he may not be Gog, or he could be, because it depends on how far we are down on the end times line. But I'm not saying that he's Gog. It could be someone's a successor who could even be worse. So I want to ask a question that I will answer at the end of this presentation. I wonder why Russia needs such a to form such a massive coalition to invade little tiny Israel, which is about the size of New Jersey. So you see the flashing red star up there, that's New Jersey. It would be almost like if Joe Biden was to say that for some reason we're going to invade New Jersey for plunder and gain. Well, we can't do it without Canada and Mexico and all the rest of the United States. It seems like overkill, correct? Because when Russia invaded Ukraine by himself, why do they need to come against little tiny Israel with such formidable troops? And we're talking a massive assortment of formidable troops. It says in Ezekiel 38:6, there'll be many people with you. And you see there's a list up there, active troops listed in 2020. They've got probably more now. There's 2.5 million worth of troops they could bring in this invasion, compared to Israel that's only got about 176,500. Seems like overkill, right? Why would they need that when they didn't need that to invade Ukraine? We'll address that after I'm done talking. So we have some very specific conditions that Israel must be residing in before this invasion can take place. And unless those conditions are met, this invasion can't take place. There can be no prerequisites. It has to be all in place. They have to be regathered from the nations in the latter years, brought back from the sword of persecution, Israel into the land of Israel, which had long been desolate. And we can give that a check mark. I'd say we've been seeing that going on for the last 74 years. But what about these? They must be a peaceful people, living in a land of unwalled villages, dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates, having silver and gold, and acquired livestock and goods, possessing booty and great plunder, because that's what Russia and their hordes are coming after. Their economies must be hurting. They're coming after what Israel has to fulfill and to help the livelihood of their economies. So we have to ask ourselves, is Israel dwelling in these conditions, peaceful, unwalled villages, securely without walls, bars, nor gates, and receipt of all this great plunder and booty? And I would suggest to you the answer to that is no. They're not living without walls, bars, nor gates in unwalled villages. Matter of fact, they have a 403-mile partition wall coursing right through the heart of Israel that separates Palestinian terror out from Israel proper. At some points, that's 20 feet high, filled with concrete. So they're not dwelling without walls, for certainly internally, but what about externally? This came out recently in 2018 in the Times of Israel. A 30-foot tall border wall goes up. The Israeli Defense Forces says Hezbollah and the Lebanese army are colluding. And here's what it's just a caption of the article. It says, the Israeli military this week publicly unveiled its 11-kilometer-long, 9-meter-tall concrete border wall along the Lebanese border. Now that would be 7 miles long and 29 feet high in, miles and feet. Now the concrete barrier is designed to serve two main functions: protect Israeli civilians and soldiers from sniper attacks and prevent infiltration into Israel by Hezbollah operatives. Now that's why they used to build walls in the old days, right? To protect against infiltration from invaders. And some of you might know that Hezbollah was building tunnels underneath those walls so they could launch a ground invasion, and Israel sniffed some of those out. Maybe not all of them. We'll have to see. That's not the only wall they're building to the north to protect themselves from Hezbollah. There's another one they built. Israel completes the border wall around Metula. That was in 2012. You see a picture of it there. So this is an extension of a different wall that we just said on the prior headline. Israel builds a new wall at the Lebanon southern border, but that's not all. Look at the headline on the bottom right. Israel starts a massive fence on the southern border with Jordan. They've even got a wall, a fence going on with Jordan. And they have a peace treaty with Jordan. But remember, 10 million people in Jordan, and 2.5 million of them are Palestinian refugees, and about 500,000 or more are actually Palestinians, including that 2.5 million. And they do not like Israel. They want a Palestinian state. Matter of fact, when you talk about walls, bars, or gates, the Middle East is the most fenced-in and fortified region in the world. You see some existing and proposed fences and walls going up there, and within all the countries in the Middle East, Israel is the most fenced-in and fortified. So I would check off, they're not dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates so far. Now, Ezekiel says they must be dwelling securely or safely. He says that 2 times in Ezekiel 38:8 and 38:11. And the Hebrew word is yeshav v'thak, dwelling securely. And what it alludes to is this military security, a security that's established, not politically brokered, but militarily accomplished. They defeat their enemies. Now they can dwell securely. They can tear down the walls, bars, and gates. If you look at his other usages of the word. So if Israel is not dwelling securely right now without walls, bars, nor gates, when will they? What will have to happen as a prerequisite to accomplish that precondition? Well, Ezekiel actually tells us 10 chapters earlier. Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 24 through 26, he says this, "Thus says the Lord God, when I have gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they are scattered, and am hallowed in them in the sight of the Gentiles, then they will dwell in their own land, which I gave to my servant Jacob." Now let's stop there for a minute. They have been getting gathered into their own land, and accomplishment of that first paragraph there. And it says, and then they will dwell safely, they will build houses and plant vineyards, yes, they will dwell securely. When I execute judgments on all those around them who despise them, then they shall know that I am the Lord their God. It's the same word, yeshav v'tak, used twice in Ezekiel 28 here, just like it was used twice in Ezekiel 38. They can't dwell safely until judgments are executed upon those around them who despise them. So we have to ask ourselves, those people around Israel who despise them, who will have judgments executed upon them to enable them to dwell safely, yeshav v'tak. If you're here last night, I told you there were, and it's this inner circle of Psalm 83. Israel's notorious enemies, they fought against Israel in 1948, 1967, 1973, and there's been other conflicts also. So they're not dwelling securely until that situation enables them to judgments executed upon those around them who despise them. Okay, so we talked about who the Magog Confederates were, but let's talk about these protesters that seem to be barking from the sidelines. They're not fighting with Israel, on behalf of Israel, but they're not invading Israel. They're just spectators apparently on the sidelines that are very concerned about what's this invasion, the motive of the invasion, and the invasion itself. And so we're told in Ezekiel 38:13 about these protesters, it says, Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish, and all their young lions will say to you, have you come to take plunder? Have you gathered your army to take booty, to carry away gold, to take away great plunder? And so we look there and you see there's a couple arrows down on the bottom. Sheba would be Yemen. That's down where the Houthis are down there. Dedan would be Saudi Arabia. And it could include also the Gulf states over there, UAE, Bahrain. Some people extrapolate it all the way over to the Persian Gulf. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman. But where is Tarshish? Okay, it's pretty easy to determine who Dedan and Sheba is, but where is Tarshish? Remember, it says the merchants of Tarshish too. Keep that in mind, not the politicians, not the athletes, not the entertainers. Well, there's 2 trains of thought predominantly as to who Tarshish is, and that would be Spain is one of the trains of thought. They say it would be Tartessus, which was in Greek mythical writings. It's very unclear whether it was even a city, a river, or a nation. But they would say the young lions or the young villages would be the Latino countries, South America, and things like that. I've looked at those arguments. I have discounted them. Tartessus is really mainly Greek mythologically. But you'll see for the other reasons I put forward that it sort of, the evidence starts going heavily into the side of the UK as merchants of Tarshish. But like I said, the bottom line is so the other theory is the UK. And from the UK, the young lions came out. You had North America, Canada, America, Australia, etc. The merchants of Tarshish is the theme. It appears to be these protesters, whoever they are, as we try to put a face on them, they're concerned about this invasion because they have commercial interests at stake with Israel. You know, right now, I had lunch today with John and Eric Stakelback, and a headline came out that said, Europe is asking Israel to export natural gas to Europe because in the Ukraine, the sanctions that Europe put on with the Russia's invasion, Russia was sending a lot of gas into Europe. With the sanctions now, they're not getting all that gas. So they've asked Israel, who's wealthy in gas, to start exporting it to them. They came and personally approached the Europeans, approached Israel last month to do this, and this is already starting to happen now. So let's look now biblically and historically and geographically at Tarshish. We have a lot of scriptures dealing with Tarshish that tells us a lot of clues, so we can try to find out the location of this place. Who is Tarshish? We're told in Genesis 10, verses 4 through 5. The sons of Javan, Elisha, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim, these were the isles of the Gentiles, the islands. The isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, and their families and their nations. The isles of Tarshish show up at least 4 times more in the Bible. So they're clearly, geographically, isles. Now, the UK, I have a picture of the British Isles. Islands of Great Britain, Ireland, the Isle of Man. There's 6,000 smaller isles. There's about 136 permanently inhabited isles, whereas Spain is not really known for its islands. It's connected to the continent of Europe. So there's one clue. Where is Tarshish? So we know there are isles, but where are these isles? Well, we have a clue when Jonah was asked by God to go warn the Assyrians that judgment was coming. And you know the story, Jonah got on a ship at Joppa, went down to Joppa. He found a ship going to Tarshish, which is entirely the opposite direction of where he was supposed to be going. And of course, God got him to do his commission by getting him swallowed up by a whale. So I won't go into the whole biblical story. I'm sure you've been taught that in Sunday school. So he paid the fare and there went into them to Tarshish in the presence of the Lord, showing he's going, hightailing it as far as he can to the west of Israel. We have a psalm that says, Thou breakest the ships of Tarshish with an east wind. So Tarshish would be coming from the west, an east wind would break their sail. Okay, so the islands we're talking about are far to the west so far. Now, some archaeologists say that, as a matter of fact, I'll give you a quote from Mark Hitchcock, but they say it's beyond the Gibraltar. So you see the Strait of Gibraltar there's between Spain and Morocco, and you come up around that, you got the British Isles. I've got it highlighted there. Dr. Mark Hitchcock, a Bible prophecy scholar, says this in his book, The Late Great United States. Some archaeologists believe that Tarshish was the ancient name of Britain. Tarshish can also mean beyond Gibraltar, depending on your translation. Tarshish and her villages are young lions, in other words, Britain, which then settled Canada and the United States and Australia. Okay, so the definition of beyond the Gibraltar. Okay, so we're finding more far to the west, the islands far to the west, the Isles of the Gentiles. But what is Tarshish known for? Tarshish, here's a quote in Ezekiel 27:12. Remember, the theme we're dealing with here is the merchants of Tarshish, so we get a clue here. Historically, Tarshish was talking about Tyre and Lebanon, merchant by reason of the multitude of all kinds of riches. These islands were rich. Rich with what? With silver, iron, tin, and lead. They traded in thy fairs. 7 other times you see the merchants and riches connected with Tarshish. So they were rich in minerals that came over to the Middle East. They also were known for their strong seaworthy ships that could travel long distances throughout inclement conditions, carrying these fine precious metals and other wares. The ships of Tarshish did sing of thee in thy market, and thou wast replenished and made very glorious in the midst of the seas. Ezekiel 27:25. Seaworthy ships filled with silver, iron, tin, and lead. And I write in the Now Prophecies book, about 587 BC, Ezekiel acknowledged that tin was among the primary metals that came from Tarshish. Cornwall, a county on England's rugged southwestern tip, was the only major source of tin in Europe for the past 2,500 years. It is also true that the mountains of Wales, just north of Cornwall, have been a source of all the minerals and metals listed above in Ezekiel 27:12. There was a study done in 2019 by Heidelberg University entitled The Enigma of Bronze Age Tin, reinforcing what I had just read to you. They examined Bronze Age tin from the 2nd millennium BC from Israel, Turkey, and Greece. And they concluded the tin artifacts from Israel, for example, largely matched tin from Cornwall and Devon, which is in Great Britain. So we had a study done just a few years back that evidences that. J.R. Church, who has founded Prophecy in the News, who has since went on to be with the Lord, wrote in his book, The Guardians of the Grail, an inscription discovered in 1780 on a cliff above Mount Hope Bay in Bristol, Rhode Island, contained an engraving that read, "Voyagers from Tarshish, this stone proclaims." It's believed to be inscribed around 533 BC. Harvard University has found 5 locations within the United States where the merchants of Tarshish had colonies. So archaeologically, geographically, biblically, historically, so far we're really putting the pendulum over, swinging over here toward the UK and not Spain, right? As Tarshish. Let's look at geopolitically in modern times. Since we just looked at the other aspects, there was a time at a zenith by 1922, the empire on which the British Empire was known as the empire on which the sun never set. You see the map up there, all the red areas. The sun would rise in the east and set on the west. So the sun would never really set in the British Empire. They had sovereignty over 458 million people, which is about 1/5 of the world's population. 13 million square miles, almost 1/4 of the earth. That's what they had. Here's a banner from World War I when the British fought in World War I against the Ottoman Empire and the Germans, along with the French, etc. And this is a banner for World War I, and it says, World War I, Young Lions, Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, enlist with the old lion. So they were calling them Young Lions, their colonies from Tarshish, and them being the old lion. Now, of course, you'd say, well, where's America? And America had broken away in 1776. This prophecy was written about 2,600 years ago, before America became independent. Now, geopolitically, let's look at that perspective. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. They had controlled the Middle East for 400 years, from 1517 to 1917. And you see that who took control was France, took over the Syria, Lebanon area, and England, what's called Tarshish, took over, it was Israel today, Jordan today, parts of Saudi Arabia, much of Iraq. And then what happened was, over time, in the 1900s, these Arabs started getting their states as the UK started and France started to relinquish their control over these areas. Egypt 1922 got its statehood, Saudi Arabia and Iraq 1932. You see the list up there, Iran 1935. Now Iran used to be called Persia. In 1935 they renamed it to Iran. Lebanon 1943, Syria and Jordan 1946, and then Israel 1948. So we see that the merchants of Tarshish being the UK, was instrumental in modern times in the Middle East area. Well, what we don't see is anything dealing with Spain, right? There's no Spain in there, so another check mark against Spain as being Tarshish. Now, at that time, after World War I, the UK came out with the Balfour Declaration, which was supposed to give the Jewish people the land of Israel, and actually what is modern-day Jordan. It was called Transjordan at that time. But the Arabs who got their statehood were agonizing, saying, don't give it, we helped you win the war against the Ottoman Empire. Don't give Israel a statehood. So they convinced the UK not to act upon sovereignly what they were supposed to do. And there was a San Remo conference, which was legal rights to give Israel their land. That was shortly after the Balfour Declaration. But they didn't do what they were supposed to do, and I believe God punished them for that, because they subjected the Jews, who should have had a homeland, to 6 million Jews to be exterminated by Hitler. So now we find that the sun always sets on the British Empire. From 1922 to 1990, they, at this point, are just 94,000 square miles with about 66 million people. The sun always sets on the British Empire now. Now, while they were declining over those 70 so years, there was this upstart country that was becoming a very ferocious young lion. It was called America. And who do we see involved in the Middle East more so than any other country right now? And that would be America. We see that we brokered a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, Jimmy Carter in 1979. Bill Clinton brokered a peace treaty between Israel and Jordan in 1994. But we have to ask ourselves the question, okay, so we've looked geographically, biblically, historically, archaeologically, now geopolitically. It does look pretty convincing that we can find ourselves in this prophecy, but how do we find ourselves? We find ourselves barking from the sidelines as a cowardly young lion, not helping Israel. You can understand why the UK wouldn't fight against Russia and all this formidable alliance, but America is still the #1 superpower. What happens to us? Are we on a decline like the UK? Will the sun set on this empire? Well, the USA has been in the danger zone for 60 years, since 1962. I'm going to show you a few Supreme Court decisions when we gave God his walking papers. We said, we don't need you anymore. We don't need our children to learn about you in the schools or pray about you. 1962, when John F. Kennedy was president, Engel versus Vitale, Supreme Court decision, removal of prayer in public schools. The next year, Abington School District versus Schempp, removal of Bible reading in public schools. John F. Kennedy was assassinated 5 months later in November. I'm not saying that's why. I'm just making an observation. Then Richard Nixon was around when Roe versus Wade with legalized abortions. Now, Jeremiah tells us that you knew my days before I was even in the womb. And God told Adam and Noah that, I want you to multiply on the earth and raise godly offspring. Presently, we've deprived over 60 million babies of that opportunity. He was impeached shortly thereafter. Just making an observation. And then there were some other localized state things, Stone versus Graham. That was actually a federal Supreme Court. 10 Commandments moved out of the classrooms. Texas state law, Lawrence versus Texas, when George Bush was the president. Struck down sodomy laws, which affected extensions and validated sodomy laws in 13 other states. And we had some other really big Supreme Court decisions when Barack Obama was president. United States versus Windsor in 2013 struck down the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA. They couldn't defend the constitutionality of one man being married to one woman. When you can't defend the biblical model of marriage, then you can redefine marriage, and that happened in 2015. Obergefell versus Hodges' approval of same-sex marriages. And at the same time around there, Barack Obama, his administration got themselves involved in the JCPOA Iran nuclear deal with a terrorist nation that wants to wipe Israel off the map. So we're in the danger zone where I believe our superpower status is going to wane quickly. I see it already happening. The president currently on staff, the administration wants to go global. So anything's possible. We wake up every morning and have to wonder what's next, right? So, while John and I were at the East Coast Calvary Chapel Pastors Conference on Tuesday with 2,500 pastors from the East Coast, very anointed men, it was such a beautiful experience, praise and worship. I'm so blessed to be there as a guest. We got out to only find out that Robb Elementary School shooting had happened. 19 students and 2 adults had been killed. So, it's a crazy country at this point in time, and God's hedge of protection has We're going through what's called abandonment wrath in Romans 1, where God takes down his hedge of protection. I was going to a movie a few years back with my son's father-in-law, and they were watching a 12-year-old kid for their neighbor. And the 12-year-old kid said, "Hey, Bill, you're going to the movies." He goes, "Me and my dad, when we go, we always sit in the back, very far back." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He goes, "We don't want to get shot. We're concerned when we go to the theater, we might get shot." 12-year-old kid, this is like 3 or 4 years ago. Is there anywhere safe in America? State buildings, Alfred P. Murrah, Timothy McVeigh, 1995, 168 killed. High schools, Columbine. Universities have been struck, military installations, supermarkets, shopping malls, concerts in Las Vegas, country western concert, you probably remember that gory thing, movie theaters, churches, etc. So our current president had this to say about the recent shooting.
Mass shootings rarely happen anywhere else in the world. Why? They have mental health problems. They have domestic disputes in other countries. They have people who are lost. But these kinds of mass shootings never happen with the kind of frequency they happen in America. Why? Why are we willing to live with this carnage? It's time for those who obstruct or delay or block the common sense gun laws. We need to let you know that we will not forget.
So you just answered why. We need to take away all of your guns. So let's defund the police and take away the guns, right? No, I say let's fund the police and put some cops in front of the schools.
Amen.
So look for more of a push in that direction of gun control. How can America decline to be a cowardly young lion on the sidelines? Possible scenarios: international or domestic terrorism, economic collapse perhaps. What about an EMP, electromagnetic pulse atomic weapon? This is a nuclear weapon, and the EMP is, that it's launched up miles above the Earth over an area, and when it bursts altitude, it shoots out like the speed of light, like a canopy, and fries everything underneath it. So for instance, the burst altitude of 30 miles would take out that much of America. You take it up a little higher, you could take out Canada, all of America. Now, that's a nuclear weapon. China's got them, Russia's got them, North Korea's got them. People who don't really like us. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but, you know, it's a realm of possibility. What about the rapture? What if you took out, we don't know how many millions of Americans, some people say it's 30, 40, 50 million Americans. How would the societal functions would collapse? There'd be some political leaders that would go away, military leaders, military soldiers, etc. All your societal aspects would be concerned. So, and I'm looking for that, to be honest with you. The rapture could happen. And who's going to be left behind? I'm not going to get political on you, but, you know, all the liberals, globalists, anti-biblical, pro-abortion, pro-homosexual, they get to have what they want. So let's go back to Ezekiel 38 now that I think we've got a pretty good pulse on who the merchants of Tarshish and the young lions are. This is too formidable of an advance for the Israeli Defense Forces, and we just ruled out America helping out. So God's going to take the helm here, and supernaturally he's going to stop this invasion with a great earthquake. Every man's sword is going to be against his brother. So this great earthquake is going to panic these invaders who are speaking different languages. You know, they don't all speak the same language. Turkey doesn't speak Farsi, right? So they're going to start killing each other, panicking from the earthquake. There'll be pestilence and bloodshed, flooding rains, great hailstones, and fire and brimstone. And then imagine this happening. So we've been watching Ukraine, right? We've still been watching the TV, seeing Russia moved in there. But imagine there's reporters on the ground. They see the Russian troops with their hordes coming, it says, from the uttermost parts of the north. They're starting to mobilize. They're getting ready to come and invade Israel. Merchants of Tarshish and young lions and Sheba and Dedan are going, "What are you doing, Russia? You coming for our commercial interests in Israel? We got contracts with them that we need to, you know, our economies need what they got, right? What are you doing, Russia?" And here comes Russia coming down. Now it's clear to us they're going to invade. You got the CNN reporters, the Fox reporters going, oh, now we get it. Oh my goodness. So they're starting to come down to the north, and all of a sudden there's a great earthquake. And they don't get to make their attack on the mountains of Israel, and they're killing each other, and there's pestilence flying down, and there's flooding rains. It's going to be pretty clear to most people that that was the God of the Jews that stopped that. So that's when he says, I read this earlier to you, I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. I will not let them profane my holy name anymore. Then the nation shall know that I'm the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. Now, it says the nation shall know I'm the Lord. That doesn't, they will know that that was supernatural, you know. There won't be a salvation knowledge. They'll just come to recognition that that was God. So what happens in the aftermath? The Israelis will burn the weapons for 7 years, convert them to fuel. I'll get into that in a second. Weapons for fuel. This is what it says, Ezekiel 39, verses 9 and 10a. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use the weapons for fuel and burn them up, the small and large shields and bows and arrows, the war clubs and spears. For 7 years they will use them for fuel. They will not need to gather wood from the fields or cut it from the forest, because they will use the weapons for fuel. Now Ezekiel's talking about bows and arrows and war clubs and stuff, because he didn't have nuclear weapons and technologies that they could use and convert to fuel right now. They would burn wood and things for fuel, for heating and cooking and energy purposes, right? So I think he's clearly talking, and there wouldn't be enough bows and arrows to burn for 7 years, right? And Russia's not going to leave their best weapons on the shelf. They'll probably be bringing their ABCs, atomic, biological, and chemical weapons with their group. You might find it interesting to know that the technology to convert nuclear weapons into energy already exists today, and America has employed it for quite some time. Here's some headlines. Megatons to megawatts, Russian warheads fuel used for U.S. power plants. New York Times reported in 2009, power for U.S. from Russia's old nuclear weapons. Remember, the Soviet Union disbanded. So the nuclear weapons, somehow we've been using some of those for nuclear, and it says Russian nuclear warheads provided electricity for the U.S. for 20 years. So that technology already exists. And Russia and Israel, if it doesn't already know how to have that technology, they will know at that time. Now how do we, one of the reasons why, there's two reasons why I believe this is a pre-tribulation event, Ezekiel 38. The first reason, not necessarily the stronger reason, but as I said, God's going to let the world know he's a covenant-keeping God. His holy name is going to be made known. And I think he's going to do that before the tribulation, because in the tribulation, the Antichrist will start to come on the scene, and ultimately the mid part of the tribulation, he's going to force people to worship him. It'll be a very popular choice, very deceptive. There'll be signs and lying wonders. And I don't think God's going to go at the mid part of the tribulation when the Antichrist is give people the mark of the beast, or get in the mark of the beast and go, oy vey, I wish I would have done this sooner. He didn't really do oy vey, that's sort of a Jewish thing. That I do that kind of wakes me up. The other reason I believe it's a pre-tribulation event, and a lot of scholars, Ron Rhodes, Dr. Ronald Fruchtenbaum, and others adhere to this thought, that you could burn weapons for the first 3.5, when you understand the tribulation period, it's compartmentalized into a first half of 3.5 years and a second half of 3.5 years. And the first half of 3.5 years, Israel's living in a condition of peace, because they've had a covenant confirmed by the Antichrist, and it's a pseudo-peace because it gets broken in the middle part, false peace. But they could burn weapons for 3.5 years and convert them to fuel. But in the second half, they won't be doing that, because they'll be fleeing from the Antichrist, because we're told that they will try to, the Antichrist will try to commit genocide of the Jewish people, and it says 2/3 of the Jews will be killed in the land, 1/3 will be a faithful remnant who comes out. So they're going to be fleeing for their lives. If anything, they'll grab a weapon to use it to get to where they're going. So you could burn weapons 3.5 years before the tribulation. You could bury 3.5 years into the first half of the tribulation. But at the mid part of the tribulation, you're not going to be converting to fuel. And it's clearly talking about the people in the cities of Israel are doing this, not anybody else, not the Antichrist or anything like that. So I think we have a pre-tribulation event. I personally think the church will be raptured prior to this event, but I don't know. You know, this is very Israel. 3 times where in Ezekiel 38 and 39 he talks about my people Israel. It talks about also them cleansing the land several times, which is a ritual requirement of the law. So the way Israel will respond to this is they're going to want to build their temple and start doing sacrifices and offerings and stuff like that. They'll realize God defended them on a large scale. Then it goes on to give us even some more details. So many details in Ezekiel 38 and 39. They're going to bury the dead in a valley called Hamongog. They're going to bury them for 7 months. And we're told that they're going to bury them in a valley east of some sea that will obstruct travelers. So we'll look at what sea they could be talking about. And when they're converting the weapons to fuel and burying these hordes of Gog, Hamongog means hordes of Gog, the invaders, they're dead. Israel gains world renown. You know, their God just stopped the most massive armed and dangerous invasion in the Middle East, and they're converting weapons to fuel with great technology, not cutting down trees, planting trees. And they bring the dead for 7 months in some valley. Well, we'll look at a location of that valley in a moment. But it goes on to say, they will set men apart, regularly employed, with the help of a search party, to pass through the land and bury the bodies remaining on the ground in order to cleanse it. Of course, they're going to be contaminated, right? At the end of the 7 months, they'll make a search. The search party will pass through the land. When anyone sees a man's bone, he will set up a marker by it till the buriers have buried it in the valley of Hamongog, which doesn't exist right now. It will exist when it has to exist. And I'll tell you why I think it's going to be in Jordan in a minute. But this sounds like a hazmat operation, right? So the sea, east of some sea in a valley that will obstruct travelers. Well, east of the Mediterranean Sea is Israel proper, and I don't think they're going to bury all these dead soldiers contaminated in Israel proper. Then your other candidate is Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, and a lot of mountains over in that area. That's where Syria is. Not necessarily a likely candidate for that. They could try to deport all these dead bodies down to the Red Sea, which would take them down to Saudi Arabia, east of the Red Sea. Not likely. Saudi Arabia wouldn't allow that, nor would they really want to run them all through Israel proper down there. So the next candidate would be the Dead Sea. East of the Dead Sea is a perfect place. That's central Jordan, desert valley, wasteland. No one's really taking tours over there. And Israel's going to have possession of Jordan, in my estimation, by this time. I went through this last night. I'll show one prophecy. Israel's going to annex Jordan before Ezekiel 38 and 39, in my estimation. It says, I heard the reproach of Moab and the insults of Ammon, that's central Jordan, Moab, northern Jordan, Ammon, which they made reproach against my people, arrogant threats against their borders. Here's what's going to happen for that. The residue of my people, the Israeli defense forces, shall plunder them, and the remnant of my people, the Israelis, shall possess them. They're going to move into that territory. So I believe the valley of Hamongog is actually going to be east of the Dead Sea in Jordan, which if Israel takes over Jordan before the tribulation, that's really good news, because Jesus made a comment in Matthew 24. He said to the Jewish people that when you see the abomination of desolation, when the Antichrist goes in the middle part of the tribulation and sets up, does the abomination, which some people think is the image of the beast, spoken by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand. Now notice that whoever reads, let him understand. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. Those Jews need to understand that. We need to understand that. If we're reading it, we need to understand it too. And let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and was suggested from other scriptures, the mountains he's talking about is the mountains in southern Jordan. Now, if Israel has possession of southern Jordan and Jordan in general, that's really great news, because there's a place called Petra. It's a rock cave fortress that they could seek refuge there. But if they don't have possession of Jordan, this is terrible advice, because Jordanians are not going to let several million Jews come tromping across to get over there. So, and Christ anticipated the annexation of Jordan when he said that, in my estimation. Another clue that this prophecy is about to find fulfillment is, we're told in Ezekiel 39:17, speak to every sort of bird and to every beast of the field, assemble yourselves and come, gather together on all sides for my sacrificial meal, which I am sacrificing for you, a great sacrificial meal in the mountains of Israel, that you may eat flesh and drink the blood. So God is saying to the birds every sort of vulture bird, every bird, and every beast to assemble themselves for the great feast of the hordes of Gog. Now, a bird can't come to a feast, sacrificial meal, in Israel if they're in Canada or if they're in America. It'll take too long to fly there, right? Well, the good news is they're already there. So here's a few headlines. It's an amazing phenomena. These birds are already there getting ready for the sacrificial meal, which makes us wonder, how close is this event really about to happen? The stage is really getting set. So here's the headline. Times of Israel, 2019. The Egyptian vultures returned to Carmel Mountains after 60 years. Times of Israel, May of 21. Vultures thought extinct from Israel for 30 years, spotted twice in a month. That was back 21. Jerusalem Post, 2017. Israeli vulture population is on the rise. 2007. The Iraqi birds that made Aliyah. They came from Iraq. Times of Israel, 2016, while Israel is a pilgrimage site for birds. And 2017, Israel's 500 million birds, the world's 8th wonder. So we're getting close on this prophecy. But like I said, they have to be dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates. They can't dwell securely because the people around them who despise them need judgments executed upon them. So that's Ezekiel 38. It's stage set for happening. You see those belligerents. We saw this map earlier. It's going to happen, and God's going to stop it. And Islam's going to be hurt big time because there's a lot of Muslims there. I think preceding that is Psalm 83, which are Muslim countries that need judgments executed upon them. They are around them and they despise them. I talked about that last night for the young adults that weren't here. So I think what's going to happen is after Psalm 83 and Ezekiel 38, Allah is going to lose his Akbar. Now, what happens when a terrorist, in the name of his God Allah, goes to do a terrorist act, he starts shouting, Allahu Akbar. Our God is the greatest God. Well, that's just not the case, right? And Allah and Jehovah are not the same God. So after Psalm 83, it'll be a punch to the gut of Islam. Ezekiel 38, an uppercut to the jawbone of Islam. The tribulation period knocks Islam out for the 10 count. Now, there's about 600 million to 800 million core Muslims in these lands, these countries. Islam's got about 1.6 billion. But these are the core people. And these 600, 800 million need to be killed, exiled, or prisoners of war. It's going to put a big dent into Islam. And many Muslims are going to start wondering, where was Allah? How come the little Jews who don't like their God out, took out our people? So there's different, these are two different prophecies. Psalm 83, it involves the Arabs versus the Jews. Ezekiel 38 involves mostly non-Arabs versus Jews. Inner circle of countries, different enemies versus an outer ring. The motives are different. They take the land. Psalm 83, they want the pastures of God for their possession. Ezekiel 38, they want to take the booty and the plunder. Different motive. Different defeats. Israeli Defense Forces, I pointed this out last night, defeat their enemies around them. Or as the Lord supernaturally has to step up to defend Israel against the massive invasion of Russia. And the different results is that it will end the ancient hatred of the Arabs and the Jews once and for all. In Psalm 83, but Ezekiel 38, God will make his holy name known to the nations of the world and to Israel, that he's the Holy One in Israel. So let's answer that question with all this in mind. Why does Russia need to form such a massive coalition to take out New Jersey? Because Israel is about the size of New Jersey. So let's just say, and I'm using the word Biden, he's the president. Let's just say he says, let's try to, the Bible Belt says, hey, listen, we don't need any help. We can take out this New Jersey. Now, imagine New Jersey being Israel has just won the Psalm 83 war, right? Now they're expanding territorially into Jordan, and they're taking, and the word for plunder and booty is shalal, that's spoil from the despoil, so they're also getting plunder and booty annexing land. They'll probably have their own natural gas, probably discover oil by then. They're going to be a very wealthy nation. Their God rule has stopped Russia. So all of a sudden they say, we'll take out New Jersey, and they lose. And New Jersey moves over and starts annexing land, taking over the police departments and nuclear arsenals and stuff like that. Now, do you think they would need a little more support? Okay. Well, ultimately, Israel will expand. They will expand into all the land God gave Abraham in Genesis 15:18, from the river of Egypt to the river Nile, the river Euphrates, which is in Syria and Iraq. When Jesus comes, he will give them all that land. But as my contention is that they will annex some territory, probably this much area after Psalm 83, and expand territorially. So we're going to see a lot of things geopolitically shifting. We may not be here to see all. We'll probably see some of the annexation if we're here for Psalm 83, but we won't see the Russian invasion unless we're still here. Psalm 83 is pre-trib, Ezekiel 38 is pre-trib, the rapture is pre-trib. Psalm 83, the rapture could happen before, during, and after Psalm 83, or before, during, and after Ezekiel 38. But they're all three, in my estimation, pre-tribulation events. I showed why the Israel Defense Forces fighting the Arabs, it has to be pre-trib, because they're not fighting in the tribulation period. Annexing territory, Israel has a history of doing this. I talked about this last night, but for the young adults, when they win wars, Joshua did it 3,500 years ago. They annex territory. It increases the defensibility of their borders. It's land within the promised land. They feel justified that that's their land. King David and King Solomon did it 3,000 years ago. The Israeli Defense Forces did it in 1967 when they won a war. They took over Jerusalem, almost tripled their size. And they're going to, in my estimation, do it again once the Israeli Defense Forces execute judgments around those who despise them. That will be the tool God uses so that Israel can dwell securely. I write quite a bit about what I'm going to tell you tonight in this next 10 short minutes, Reader Digest version, in my Final Prophecies book out there. But we're trying to get to Q&A, but I wanted for the young adults to know kind of what's coming on. They're the ones who are going to be most familiar with this. And mass adoption may be very soon for even some of you not so young adults. So is the coronavirus killing off cash? This was in April, political article. Tech firms seeing the opportunity they've been waiting for as shoppers and business recoil from paper money. Who's hurt when legal tender goes away? Cash can carry viruses. It costs money to mint. It can be laundered. It can be hidden. So and it's hard to get truth for income taxes and things like that. There's a time coming in the middle of the tribulation where no one will buy or sell except they have a mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And that's going to be a cashless economy. And I'm going to read a little more about that in a minute. But here's a few headlines we're going to rifle through. Talking about cryptocurrencies, the International Monetary Fund publishes a cryptocurrency. Now you're going to notice most of these articles are during the coronavirus period. This thing just started getting accelerated by the concerns about cash. Cryptocurrency explainer saying it could be the next step in the evolution of money. That's Bitcoin.com. MasterCard and Visa are making bold moves toward mass crypto adoption. I told you last night that MasterCard has already got a technology where you can buy with your, I might have a slide on that, with your Face ID in the palm of your hand. That's operating in Brazil and maybe operating in the US very soon. The race to get the first cryptocurrency was the Bitcoin, right? But central banks couldn't control it. So they have a concern about that, they can't monitor it. And so now there's a race, like it's who's going to get to the moon first? Who's going to get the better Bitcoin? What countries have come up with it? There are a total of 87 countries that are exploring issuing a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, meaning their central bank, their federal banks. That was as of March 22, which is up from 35 countries in 2020. So they're racing ahead. You see some of the countries, the big names that are coming up with it: UK, USA, Canada, Australia, EU, China, South Korea, Japan, India, Pakistan, Russia, Mexico. 9 countries have already implemented the CBDCs. The United States has already got ready to roll out with a plan. Fed Chairman Powell says Fed report on crypto and central bank digital currency is ready to go. That was in January of this year. So it's already coming to the shores of America. Well, what is this cryptocurrency for those who aren't familiar with it? It's a digital currency in which encryption techniques are used to regulate generation of units of currency and verify the transfer of funds operating independently of a central bank. That's why the central banks want to get control of it. This means that it is decentralized, which is very problematic for central banks of countries to own their own nation's money supply. I read about that in the Final Prophecies. That's my quote. Here's a few more headlines. China rolls out a pilot test of digital currency in April 2020. Cointelegraph. Sweden is testing its new central bank digital currency. They've already been testing it. Here's a little video that the International Monetary Fund put out on cryptocurrencies. Can I get some volume?
When we buy or sell things, the payment is usually processed by a bank or credit card company. Problem number 1, the companies often take a cut of the transaction. 2, we have to trust these companies to protect our sensitive data from hackers. 3, most international payments take a long time and are expensive. To solve these problems, we could use a special currency that is secure and based on the science of cryptography, which is a way of protecting information using mathematics. This special type of currency is called a cryptocurrency and only exists in computer networks. When you send someone this special currency, the money goes directly to them, removing the middleman. And at the same time, the transaction is broadcast to the entire network and recorded in a permanent way, which means it's almost impossible to fool the system. Costs of making payments are lower, transactions are faster, especially across countries, and even those people around the globe who don't have bank accounts can buy or sell goods and participate in the global economy. However, there are some risks. The transactions in most cryptocurrencies are anonymous. Some cryptocurrencies can even be untraceable. This can make it easier for the bad guys to make payments without being noticed. If you lose your password, you could lose all your money. At the moment, cryptocurrencies are highly volatile. They can't process large amounts of transactions quickly yet, and they're not even widely accepted. But if we can counter the risks, then this new technology, or some variation of it, can completely change the way we sell, buy, save, invest, and pay our bills. And who knows, this could be the next step in the evolution of money.
That was I think a couple years ago that came out. So she said not widely accepted. There's some concerns, right? Well, it's becoming more widely accepted rapidly. So cryptocurrency works through a blockchain technology. And here's some headlines. Why blockchain could be your next form of ID as a world citizen. ID is the key for accessing education, healthcare, voting, banking, housing, and other family benefits for all citizens worldwide. The Bank of Canada is exploring digital currencies back in 2019 that would replace cash, track how people spend money, so they can track consumer behavior. And they can know how much money you made, so they can get their income taxes. The Swedes are getting implants in their hands to replace cash and credit cards. That's already happened. So what is blockchain technology? Blockchain is an electronic monitoring system in which a record of transactions made in cryptocurrencies are maintained across several linked computers in a network, not just one, but on a global basis. The block represents the digital information about a transaction, such as the products, participants, the date, the location, the dollar amount, all the details. The chain is the public database where the block information gets stored. I read about that in the Final Prophecies. So remember the old style cash register. You know, digital dollars don't fit into a leather wallet. And when you make a transaction, you'd have the receipt and sometimes the product bought and all that, the old cash register. Well, that's now giving way to this new technology, which is much more thoroughly comprehensive, records of everything. So this technology is going to be developed, it looks like, by the nations. They're going to have their own cryptocurrency. Some of them may use a common one. But at some point in time, the Antichrist is going to have a cashless society that will probably use cryptocurrencies, and no one will be able to buy or sell unless they have this technology implanted somehow in them. Now that doesn't happen until the midpoint of the tribulation, but meanwhile we're seeing the technology rapidly advancing among the nations. So when we get to the middle part of the tribulation, and we won't be here for the tribulation, if you believe in Jesus Christ. I say we corporately. I'm hoping you all believe in Jesus Christ. If you don't see John or me after the meeting, we won't scold you. There's going to be a war in heaven, and Satan and a third of the fallen angels will get cast down to the earth. That's in the mid part of the tribulation. And when he comes down, there's going to be his point man, the Antichrist, is going to have received a mortal head wound, and he will resurrect him. Now some people think, because it seems to be a true resurrection. Now Jesus Christ says, I am the resurrection, right? But the words are the same. It looks like a true resurrection, the Greek words. But some of us suspect that it's an alteration of DNA. It's some sort of weird thing, right? And then he will pick up a hitchhiker on his campaign in the midpoint of the trip called the false prophet, who will implement the image and the mark of the beast. And here's what it says about that. I saw one of his heads of the Antichrist had been mortally wounded. The deadly wound was healed. And when that happens, the whole world marvels and follows the beast. So when they see this guy, this charismatic world leader, rise from the dead, they start following him and marveling. So they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast, who is able to make war with him. And he picks up this hitchhiker, the false prophet, who, Revelation 13 tells us, he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, the Antichrist, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. If you don't worship it, you'll be killed. He causes all, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of the man. His number is 666. I'm sure that'll be one of the questions that we ask. What does that mean, right? So in the summary, false prophet, he performs signs, deceives all those on the earth. Remember, this deception is going to cause people to be standing in line for this mark of the beast. Instructs people to make an image to the beast. He gives breath to the image. Supernatural type scenario, enables it to speak and causes many who does not worship the image to be killed. So, you know, it's like, do you want to be killed? Everything's looking pretty deceptive and wonderful. Why would I want to be killed, right? He causes everyone to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so it makes no one may buy or sell unless they have the mark. Now, folks, if we're as deep on the end times line as we think we are, who thinks we're in the end times? Who thinks we're kind of like deep into the end times? Okay, meaning we probably have loved ones, people we cherish, who are not saved, that, you know, may face this sort of a thing. So we need to be really aware of that. That's why some people say, well, I don't care about this stuff. I won't be here. I'm going to get raptured. I'll be out of here. And I say, well, do you have someone you know that ain't going to be raptured, that you love? And then every hand goes up. Let's just do that. Do you have someone you love or know or cherish? Okay. That's why you care. MasterCard launches the tech that lets you pay with your face or your hand in stores. I told you about that. That's as of May 17th. That just came out. Presently, the World Health Organization they're meeting in Davos, World Economic Forum, and this is what they've come up with. One of the headlines: World Health Organization, the Global Pandemic Treaty includes a plan for mandatory universal digital passport and ID systems. See, this can all fit into the blockchain technology, into the crypto. All of it can be stored into this system. It's all digital. The WHO, World Health Organization, plans to finalize the treaty by 2024. It will aim to shift governing authority now reserved to sovereign states to the World Health Organization during a pandemic by legally binding member states to the World Health Organization's revised international health regulations. There's 194 member states of the World Health Organization. In January of this year, the Biden administration submitted a proposed amendment to the 2005 International Health Regulations, which bind all 194 UN member states, in contrast to our constitutional amendments that require a 2/3 vote from our Senate. Only a simple majority of the World Health Organization mandates that we do what they say regarding a pandemic. That means 98 votes out of 194. As part of this plan, the World Health Organization has contracted the German-based Deutsche Telekom subsidiary T-Systems to develop a global vaccine passport system with plans to link every person on the planet with a QR code digital ID. Remember the video, cryptocurrency video, she said, we can even give IDs and have people buy and sell who don't have bank accounts, right? The unbanked. And they're going to start there. They're going to try to give everyone a global digital ID. Vaccination certificates that are tamper-proof and digitally verifiable build trust. World Health Organization therefore supporting member states in building national and regional trust networks and verification technology. This is on the move, on a global reach, global transactions, fast transactions, inexpensive transactions, well-recorded transactions globally against nations. In the global order, you have to have that kind of vehicle. There's some future benefits of the new electronic methods. I read about this in my Final Prophecies book. These newer electronic methods of buying and selling are being formatted in a way that could facilitate not only a cashless society, but also offer global citizens a better access to education, travel, healthcare, vaccine, voting, banking, housing, and a host of other business and or family-related benefits. In other words, everything can be contained in the blockchain technology. You won't need a driver's license. You won't need a passport. But is there a supernatural component to the mark of the beast? A lot of people say, well, gee, I'm very concerned about this. I don't want to do the MasterCard thing where I use my Face ID or my palm of my hand. You need to know that receiving the mark of the beast is a choice at that time. It's a pledge of allegiance that I'm going to worship you. You become part of the Antichrist's club, if you will. Right? You don't get it unless you're going to. It's a reward for those who are willing to worship him. He's not going to pull the wool over your eyes and say, ha ha, I caught you, right? You're making a choice to do that. So the cashless society is part of it. You can't buy or sell without. That seems to be a technology, but it can include so much more. Digital IDs, tracking, all your records, blockchain technology. These technologies exist right now, and they're almost foolproof. So the Antichrist will be able to, he won't be omnipresent. God's omnipresent. He searches our hearts and minds, sees what our thoughts. The Antichrist can't do that, but he can track everybody's footsteps. He can know what they're doing. And if they don't comply, he can shut them off with a button. So when the time comes and he implements that technology, he will simply flip a switch and all the cryptocurrencies from the world will go into his coffer. But they have to be in place. He can't implement them at the mid part of the tribulation. And all of a sudden he says, we're going to have a cashless society, false prophet. How are we going to do that? Well, it's already going to be up and running. They just need to put it all into their blockchain scenario. So I think when he's resurrected and they're marveling, I think there's a thought here. I read about this. Maybe Satan's prodigy, the Antichrist, will turn the big garden live full circle. Perhaps the seed of the serpent will do more than echo Satan's sentiment that you will be like God, and up the ante and promise to show his worshippers how they can actually become like God, how they can become immortal. Everyone's been looking for the fountain of youth, right? A shot at immortality now that might be enough to sway someone off the fence to worship the Antichrist and take his mark, especially if someone incorporated within the mark contained a supernatural component. What if the Antichrist said something like this? In order to achieve a divine nature like me, you must become more like me, which means you must undergo a human enhancement that upgrades your DNA to resemble mine. Because those things are going on too. A couple headlines. Superpowers aren't just for superheroes anymore. Want some? San Diego Union Tribune. Brain chips could give people super intelligence. Superhuman abilities could lurk under your skin. Insertable technology could launch a new type of human. If you alter your DNA, you take yourself out of the image of God. and you become unredeemable, because the people who take the mark of the beast are no longer redeemable. They suffer the wrath of God. I'll get into that in just a minute. There's no more grace and mercy for them. They've made a conscious choice, likely to alter their image. The future of humanity, superpowers are within our reach. We stand at an unprecedented juncture in our history. It's not a question of if we develop superpowers, it's a question of when we develop them. U.S. Defense Intelligence warns of the artificial intelligence human hybrid soldiers from China. China's already developing an army of super soldiers. So with the midpoint of the tribulation, people are going to be wondering if they should take the mark. They're going to be hearing it's a bad idea. So that we're going to look at the pros and the cons as I wind down. One, you won't get beheaded, because if you don't take the mark of the beast and you're a believer, you're going to be beheaded. You should be running for your life. You become a part of a worshiper of the Antichrist. I mean, some people feel like they want to be part of that club. Like, so for instance, I'll use a Catholic, for instance. I was born a Catholic, I'll always be a Catholic. They take pride in that. I'm not trying to bash the Catholics, although I do think the Vatican's a harlot world religion. But you can buy as a consumer or sell as a merchant. You can obtain a personal world citizen digital ID that connects you to all the global services such as universal health care, universal basic income, global banking, world travel, public education, and more. And maybe just superhuman capabilities for immortality and eternal life. I mean, those are kind of things you would say. They might be thinking, hey, why wouldn't I take this thing? Well, here's some of the cons. The benefit's only going to last for 3.5 years. And the minute they get the mark of the beast, they receive loathsome sores all over their body. They get to drink of God's wrath. They get to lose their shot at salvation. They get to watch the Antichrist and the false prophet get cast into the lake of fire. They get to be judged at the white throne judgment, and they get to themselves be cast in the lake of fire at the end of the millennium. So it's a bad idea. But it's going to be appealing to a lot of people. The majority of the population will do it. All right? So listen, I've had a really good time freaking you all out over the last 2 days.